He's got. Yeah, we'll just sort of John the Baptist. Who knows who John the Baptist's parents were?
Yeah.
Elizabeth.
Mary's sister.
Not Mary's sister.
Mary's cousin.
Mary's cousin. Really, Mary's aunt.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, sort of Mary's aunt. Elizabeth and Anna were sisters, and Elizabeth's husband Zachariah was a priest, and Anna's husband was a shepherd named Joachim. So anyway, so that makes Jesus and John like cousins, right? And they probably knew each other about the same age, right? John was a couple of months older. On that, maybe a little more than that. So where are we? So we did the 12. Now we're with the death of John the Baptist. That's great. Let's. Well, I mean, not great for John, but it's. Somebody want to read? We'll just read the whole thing, and then we'll go back and we'll pull it apart a little bit.
Where are we?
We're on chapter 6 in Mark.
Right.
Speeding through, starting with verse 14 through 28. Do you have a reader? Reader. Judy, do you mind? What are you reading out of? NRSV?
Whatever's up on the shelf.
Okay, I think that's right.
6. Right. Yeah. Yes, RSG.
Okay.
King Herod heard of it, for Jesus' name had become known. Some were saying John the Baptizer has been raised from the dead, and for this reason these powers are at work in him. But others said, it is Elijah, and others said, it is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. But when Herod heard of it, he said, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised. For Herod himself had sent men who arrested John, bound him, and put him in prison on account of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because Herod had married her. For John had been telling Herod, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. And Herodias had a grudge against him and wanted to kill him, but she could not, for Herod feared John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and he protected him. When he heard him, he was greatly perplexed, and yet he liked to listen to him. But an opportunity came when Herod, on his birthday, gave a banquet for his courtiers and officers and for the leaders of Galilee. When his daughter Herodias came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his guests. And the king said to the girl, ask me for whatever you wish, and I will give it. And he solemnly swore to her, whatever you ask me, I will give you, even half of my kingdom. She went out and said to her mother, what should I ask for? She replied, the head of John the Baptizer. Immediately she rushed back to the king and requested, I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter. The king was deeply grieved, yet out of regard for his oath and for the guests, he did not want to refuse her. Immediately the king sent a soldier of the guard with orders to bring John's head. He went and beheaded him in the prison. Brought the head on a platter and gave it to the girl. Then the girl gave it to her mother. When his disciples heard about it, they came and took his body and laid it in a tomb.
Wow, there you go.
That's a cute story.
Yeah, it's not super delightful. So King Herod has John killed. Steve?
Was Herod technically Jewish?
Which could was Herod Antipas Jewish?
Yes.
Yes.
I thought he was half Jewish.
Well, Herod Antipas's father was half Jewish.
So was
Herod
he bound by the Judaic laws, or was he?
Herod the Great was half Jewish, and it's a good question about Antipas. I'm not sure if Herod Antipas's mother was Jewish. But in either case, he wasn't bound by the... What law are you referring to?
Well, if he wasn't fully Jewish, and I thought he wasn't fully Jewish, then was he really bound by Jewish law? Or was he like any other non-Jew in the region who didn't really abide by the Jewish So when John makes the claim that he was breaking the law, what law was he breaking?
Right.
Not that it's going to save John's head, but
No, it's a good question. So, there's two things in there. First of all, under the Jewish law, he wouldn't kill somebody, right? I mean, that's why the high priests in the didn't have Jesus because they went to Rome to kill Jesus, right? Herod didn't abide by that, and I'm not sure if Herod was breaking a law by having more than one wife, right? That also wouldn't be the case. But there was some kind of insinuation here with Herod marrying his brother's wife.
there's a morality issue there. But
And it's a morality. It's also, and one of the interesting things about that is, so one of the things that we've been talking about here in the Gospel of Mark is that Mark is pulling apart family allegiance and putting it in the context of this sort of greater general reality that everyone's a child of God and everybody belongs to God's family, and that's the family that Jesus represents, right? So we've been talking about the crime that Jesus has committed in the Gospel of Mark is against that family structure that he doesn't abide by. He abides by a kingdom of God family structure, right? And so we see that causing tensions when he's in Nazareth. Remember when we talked about that and how he didn't abide by the family code, and the community then sort of cast him out. But here, what I think the author is doing is he's saying, but there is still value in this. Like, we're not throwing the whole thing out, right? There is still necessary moral value and community cohesiveness that comes by having a good, strong, sturdy family system. So, because it brings us to an interesting question here. The historian Josephus wrote about John the Baptist. I mean, John the Baptist was a big deal back in the day. And Josephus wrote about him, and he wrote about Herod killing him. And what he said was, John the Baptist was sort of calling together all of these massive crowds of people. And he was a political problem for Herod. So Herod went and got him, and he chopped off his head. Right? You know, back in the day, right? It was a problem. But the interesting thing is Mark doesn't cast it that way here, does he? So that's the question. Why does Mark not say John was a political problem for Herod, so he had his head cut off, which is what Josephus said? He says this thing. Why does he say this thing? Why does he put it this way?
Because he wanted to blame it on a woman.
Because he wanted to blame it on a woman?
Since the time of that.
Possibly. Possible.
Just like,
Because it is interesting, right? He chose to represent it like this. Why would he choose to make John interesting to Herod?
Is it setting him up for what happens later?
Or is he setting him up for what happens later?
Setting up's not quite the right word, but I don't know if he's setting up Herod as being kind of a
Weak leader? Herod
weak leader, or one who has really doubts about his faith, or one who has doubts about a lot of things. And so here's one instance that he does it, then he does it again later on.
With Jesus. That's a good insight, Ann, that he is sort of setting him up. And I do think you're right in this fact that the author is setting a contrast here. Right? Herod Antipas runs Galilee. Right? He's the king. He does what he wants. Everybody comes to his birthday party, right? Sycophants galore. He marries who he wants, even if it's his brother's wife, or right? So he's got this place of power, and yet there's something about John that is more compelling. There's something that John has that he doesn't have, that he's interested in, but he doesn't quite understand, right? So he's curious enough that he wants to be around John. He wants a little bit of what John has. He wants to understand what John's power is.
politics.
Politics?
Politics.
How do you?
John has a positive image, public image, and Herod doesn't. And if Herod associates with a positive image, maybe some of that will rub off on him.
Yeah. So interesting. So what Steve said is it's politics, and if John has a positive image and Herod doesn't, maybe by association he'll get some sort of shine to his armor.
Well,
Liz?
in this one, and then later in his next, he's worried about what people will think about him. So he has all this strength and all this power, but he doesn't seem to feel real comfortable in it. He wants people to think well of him.
Yeah. So Herod, while he does have this strength, there's an insecurity or hollowness
Yeah.
at his center.
Exactly.
Right now, John, on the other hand, it seems, if we sort of reflect backwards into the text, doesn't seem to care what people think about him. Right? I mean, just the opposite of what Liz said. Right? He's like, I don't care. I wear this. I say that. If you don't like it, lump it. To quote Martha. Right? That's interesting. But what is this power that John is tapped into that is inaccessible to Herod? That he sees and he gets and he wants, but he can't have. What is that power?
God's power.
It's God's. It's the kingdom of heaven, right? I mean, John is squarely set in the center of the kingdom of heaven. And the reason he has it and Herod doesn't is because he is in it and Herod wants it, but Herod's not willing to give up what he has in order to have it. And so Herod is in a bind, right? He sees the power, he gets it, he wants it, he knows it's real, he knows what he has is a little bit hollow and always a little bit shaky. That's the reality of the earthdom power, right? This is that there's always somebody coming to get you, right? There's always, and if you don't show that strength, and we see that in a minute, we'll see that. If you don't show that strength of conviction and power, what's going to happen? Whole thing's going to crumble down. But John's got this other power. Right, so I think this conversation that the author's representing here is look at this, right? As opposed to Herod just going out there and cutting off his head. He's saying there's a tension here between real power, and fake's power desire to have real power, but they can't have it unless he's willing to do what he needs to do to get it. Right. So we have that tension here. So I think that's one reason. Helen?
Well, and he gave in to because a girl danced so beautifully, he gave in to her wish.
Okay, let's get to that.
Which doesn't sound very powerful, except that he said it was a promise. I mean, he kept making excuse upon excuse.
Well, let's get to Herodias in a second. So we've explored one reason why this author sort of gave a different accounting than Josephus. The second one, do we have another reason why?
It's very public.
It's very public?
This is very public, and Josephus was not public as far as the beheading was concerned.
Oh, interesting. So
and,
you mean
the crucifixion is very public as well.
So there's a transparency to this that Josephus didn't have? Is that what you're?
Well, it's just that it's out in the open. It's something that people are, that end up having public either clamor for it or not clamor for it or whatever. It's just not a beheading him and forgetting about it, and doing it privately. And the crucifixion becomes very public.
Same way. Yeah. Okay, yeah, it's very public, right? It's out there for everybody to sort of see the way Herod operated and see what happened to John.
And his power, in a certain sense, the power of his word, that publicly people can see
what he did.
What he decrees.
Yeah, what he decrees happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point. Others? Yeah.
I can see it. I mean, I understand that he's trying to show that he's got power when he is so insecure, but a true leader, which he's not, would have said, probably wouldn't have even said, allow that kind of things. Like, no, that's not in the realm of, a dance doesn't get a beheading.
Yeah.
Think of something else.
Yeah. New dance shoes or something,
yeah.
right?
a new veil, but no.
Yeah.
And I think, so I'm not, I think it shows more his weakness than
His strength.
than his
Shows his
strength.
weakness, right? Yeah, and so, I mean, I think that's right. So you have the contrasting powers and the weakness of Herod's temporal power and the strength of John's eternal. You have the public nature of it, right? That this is a transparent thing, and Herod trying to show off his strength, but really makes him look weak. And then the family thing, right? That there is that family does matter, and that there are moral boundaries that break down family, right? Can you imagine the tension this caused, like at Thanksgiving, between Herod and Philip? You know, that's an awkward one. You know, as long as she doesn't bring Herodias, right? I'm going to come, right? So these kinds of moral or immoral acts matter still to Mark, and the family structure and honoring it matters to Mark. So I think that's an important piece. And then just the idolatry that we get to with Helen, you were talking about Herodias and the daughter dancing. So play this out in your mind again, right? You have Herod, and he's sitting there with all of the people that report to him, or all of the sort of people right under him, and he's having a party, and it's a big party that he's having for who? For himself, right? And they all come, and it's one of those parties you know they're not going to miss, right? They're skipping their kid's birthday party to go to this, right? They're canceling vacations to go to this, right? I mean, this is the one, you know, when the king's having a birthday party, everybody goes to the birthday party. And they don't just go to the birthday party, they get a new dress, right, don't they? And they make sure they look, and then they think about what they're going to give him as a gift, right? There's just all sorts of stuff. You guys can just imagine what this looks like when the king has a birthday party. So the king's got a birthday party, and he's sitting there in his palace, and they're probably eating a lot, and they're probably drinking a lot, and then he makes, and then Herodias' daughter comes out, and she does a dance, and must be a really good dance.
Is it Herodias' daughter or his?
They're both.
Because he married his brother's wife, and it says that she's her daughter.
Oh, good point. Yeah, so his daughter Herodias came in. Yeah, so the daughter, right? And Herodias comes in, and she does the dance, and it's a really, really great dance.
So are they both mother and daughter named Herodias?
I think
It seems
that's what
very
happened.
confusing. Hey, who would do that? Herodias Jr., they should have said. Like Deutsch Jr. Herodias, you can write that in your Bible, like Herodias Jr. So Herodias Jr. comes out. She does this dance, and he says, I mean, it seems so grandiose, doesn't it? I mean, what kind of leader makes those kind of crazy, grandiose statements? Maybe the girl one. I don't know. But I mean, it's sort of silly. But what makes it more silly? That he honors it, right? That all of a sudden he does something crazy, and then he doubles down on the crazy, right? Instead of just saying, like a leader who had some substance of himself, right? Who had some kind of moral backbone or strength of character in some sense. Was it? No. We're not taking. Do something else, right? But why didn't he do that?
The most what people thought about him. And he had made it a public
Yeah,
statement.
and he
He was scared to death of his wife.
figures like scared to death of his wife, right? Because then she'd be twice as mad. I mean, he hadn't killed him, and now he said he like so double mad. His wife's mad at him. He cares. Ron, what were you saying?
Did Herodias have a grudge against Jesus?
Well, she had a grudge against John the Baptist
Yeah.
because John the Baptist kept saying,
It wasn't long.
it doesn't
She
look.
was afraid of John the Baptist taking control of Herodias.
Possibly she was afraid of that, or it was just annoying. Yeah, and like this sort of perpetual public shaming of her that she was not thrilled with. And so, but he also, once he says it, he has idolatry for his own word, doesn't he? Right? I mean, like once he put it out there, he's like, I'm trapped too. How could he be trapped by his own word, right?
Do you think that they're also setting this up that he's doing it at a party? You know, it's not like he's in his council making this decision to do this under judge-like conditions. He's, probably had enough to drink and eat and caught up in the moment, and it's at a party that he's doing something so despicable. And not saying, whoa, let's think about this, and it's not the proper time or the place to make this kind of decision. Oh, hey, let's have another beer, and off with that.
Yeah.
He's tweeting it.
That's up. He's tweeting it out, and then he can't retweet, or somebody retweets it. And I mean, it's hard to say.
Lots of parallels, aren't there, Gary?
Possibly.
Noticing that down here too.
But it is it's an interesting reflection on leadership, isn't it? And Herod's isolated, right? I mean, there's nobody who can come to him and pull on his sleeve and say, "Oh, that's a bad idea," right? And so. And that he would listen to, right? So you can tell the trajectory of his leadership has been towards further and further isolation, right? So we know that's happened, and people haven't traveled with him that are giving him feedback, like maybe we should just postpone this till tomorrow. So he's incredibly isolated. But also let's go back to this part. What's the conversation on this? Let's go back to the very beginning, 14. Herod heard of it, for Jesus' name had become known. So what's the question here? That Jesus is John the Baptist? So that's... And some are saying John the Baptist was raised from the dead as Jesus. Right? That's the question. And for this reason, these powers are at work in him. What powers is Jesus doing that John had done? He's baptizing, yeah? He's gathering, let's just sort of be... He's gathering a crowd, right? He's gathering...
He's stirring up his...
Big crowd. He's... All of a sudden, all of John's folks, when John got picked up on the street and brought into the slammer, all of them start following Jesus. Right? So now...
Because John says, a greater one is coming than me.
Right. I mean, yeah, that was foretold, wasn't it? I mean, he said, hey, when I disappear... And we even see that in the Gospel of John at the beginning, right? Some of John's followers are probably Andrew and Peter, and James and John. And he says, and Nathaniel, go follow this guy, right? So now... but some are saying, no, it's not... Let's see, John the Baptizer had been raised from the dead, and for this reason, these powers are at work in him. But others said, it's Elijah.
Yeah. He's a prophet like one of the old-time prophets.
He's like one of the old-time prophets. But Herod said, Jesus is John. Right? So there's all sorts of sort of confusion and linkage here with Old Testament prophets. But also, what other word is introduced here that's super interesting? That he was raised from the dead. Right? That he is raised from the dead. Now we have a little piece in the Old Testament that talks about this. And let's turn to it, right? So you have to remember, and I just want to keep. This is something I talk about a lot. These folks live in the Old Testament stories, right? This is, they don't have all the stuff to distract them like we do, right? These are stories that sit in their mind. And so when they're talking about Elijah, what happened to him when he died? Or did he die? Like, what was that story? Anybody remember that story? He right? He wasn't feeling well, and he was going to go off and die or something, and his underling, the guy who was following around, was a guy named Elisha. That's so confusing. They should have given him like Jim or Bill or something. Because you have Elijah and Elisha, right? So anyway, Elijah is going off, and he's sort of at the end of his ministry, and Elisha is coming, and he wants to be there when he dies. He wants to, and they finally cross the Jordan, and when they get to the other side, what happens? A chariot of fire swoops down. This is pretty cool. Picks him up and takes him directly to heaven. Good exit strategy. Anybody know who the other person who was taken directly to heaven was in the Old Testament? Enoch. Right? Enoch was taken directly to heaven, and Elijah. So then, that's what you were going to say, Enoch.
No. We were just saying ease. Elijah.
Oh, the ease.
Enoch.
Yeah, you got
The ease have it.
The ease have it. Maybe that's...
I don't know.
How did Enoch get up there?
Good question. Should we go look? Let's go look for Enoch. Give me know where Enoch is.
Genesis.
That's right, Genesis. It all sort of goes right back to Genesis. Chapter 5.
Oh, no, not another.
Well, you brought it up, Enoch. So we're going to talk a little bit about Enoch. Enoch, chapter 5, verse 21. And let's do a little bit better than that. Let's go to verse 18 and read verse 18 through 24. Darla, you there?
When Jared had lived 162 years, he became the father of Enoch. Awesome. And after he had become the father of Enoch, Jared lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Jared lived 962 years.
Okay, so we'll stop there.
And then he died.
And he died.
Then he died. Yeah, he was like, wow, I'm ready, brother. I'm exhausted. My knees are killing me.
Do they count the years differently?
Dog years.
Dog years or months. I don't know. Maybe he's that old. That's old. Steve?
This is just a backhanded promotion for Tom Johnson's forum this Sunday.
Yeah.
We're going through the genealogy there. And that's why I knew all about Enoch. But so if you're interested about, did they really live that long? How did they live that long? And why did Enoch just sort of melt into the, it's all for Sunday's forum.
Yeah. But if you read forward to chapter 6 here in Genesis, it might give you a little insight. I would read through there, but we won't do that today, Steve. So Darla, sorry, go on.
When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. And after he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived 365 years. Enoch walked with God. Then he was no more because God took him away.
And then read on.
When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech. And after he became the father of Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Methuselah lived 969 years, and then he died.
So you see the difference there? Right? And so...
Enoch only lived half the time.
He only lived half the time, and then he
He
walked with God, then he was no more because God took him. So the tradition says that he was taken like Elijah because he didn't die. Right? All these other guys died. Enoch didn't die. He was taken by God. He walked with God. It was a different thing. And so the tradition tells us that Enoch didn't die. He was just taken by God and then was no more. So anyway, Elijah, on the other hand, he was taken by God, and he was no more, and he went up in a chariot of fire. So then the tradition tells us, because everybody knows he was taken by chariot of fire, let's go to Malachi. Because Malachi then gives us a little insight. Malachi is harder to find than Genesis. But it is the last chapter of the Old Testament. and if it's helpful, let's see. It's the last sentence in the last chapter of the Old Testament. It's where we're left off before we go into the great silence for 450 years. So Malachi, right? End of the Bible, right, Amber? Last sentence. Lo, I will send you. Tom, you want to read it?
Lo, I will send you the prophet Elijah before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of parents to their children and the hearts of children to their parents, so that I will not come and strike the land with a curse.
So, last sentence of the Old Testament, the way it's lined up in the Christian Bible, is Malachi, and it ends with this prophecy. Lo, I will send you a prophet, the prophet Elijah. So, right, in the common imagination, Elijah is coming back, right? Is he coming back as John the Baptist? Is he coming back as Jesus? Like, who is this because he's coming back? So that's what's in Herod's mind when we get into this place, which is why everybody's wondering, who was this guy? And this is going to unfold for us in chapter 6 and chapter 7 of Mark, right? A little bit of, hey, this is who he was. John the Baptist was Elijah. But if John the Baptist was Elijah, or representative of, or represented Elijah in this preparing a way, who's Jesus? So we'll get to that in a second. But they're also, let's talk about prophets for a minute, since we're in the place of prophets. And since we got time here in chapter 6. So what is a prophet? Right? Slow motion Bible study with Doyd. Let's turn to Jeremiah 1, chapter 1, verse 10. Because they're talking about these prophets. So what's their expectation when they're thinking about prophets? Jeremiah, right? It's after, Diane, who's Jeremiah after?
Isaiah.
Right on. Isaiah, Jeremiah.
Jeremiah what?
Jeremiah 1.
Oh.
Right at the beginning.
1:1.
No, 1:10, but you can
Wing.
wing it. Let's see if I can.
See the way I appoint you.
Jeremiah what?
1:10.
1:10. So maybe we'll go with 9. So who was Jeremiah? What was Jeremiah? Maybe I'll ask that. What was his job description? Prophet. Prophet. He made it in the Bible as a prophet.
Family of priests.
Wasn't it bullfrog?
That's what we're saying over here.
Yeah. I'll go work with Ruth Ann later on that one. That's he was a prophet, and there's a definition of prophet here. So let's read 9 and 10. What's a prophet do? Somebody want to read this? Ann?
Then the Lord put out his hand and touched my mouth, and the Lord said to me, now I have put my words in your mouth. See, today I appoint you over nations and over kingdoms, to pluck up and to pull down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant. The word of the Lord came to me, saying... So
we'll just let's hold it there, because so what happened with this prophet? What made him a prophet?
God touched him.
God touched his mouth, right? And God said, today I appoint you over nations and kingdoms. Right? So this is a little threatening to John the Baptist, because a prophet has primacy over who? Kings and nations, right? And so that's a bummer. You know, Herod's better off putting John the Baptist in this clink and not letting anybody hear him, because the minute he kills him, his voice gets a little bit louder, and that's what he was seeing with Jesus, right? What John was saying, it's just gotten worse, because Jesus is out there saying the same thing. And what does what does the prophet say? What's he do? He
Plucks up and plucks down.
plucks up and he pulls down.
But also to build a new plant.
Build a plant. So let's take these one at a time. What does pluck up mean?
Build up, help, support, show them the way to improve.
Yeah, I mean, to show the way to improve, but also like this is where the energy and the power is, right? Over here, this is the thing, and over here, what you thought was good, yeah, it's like lift up. That's good, Judy, right? And then over here, put it down. Maybe what was once thought to be of great esteem, the pushes down. What else does the prophet do? Destroys and overthrows. That's sort of negative, right? And nobody likes the negative stuff. But here's the really important thing. I think sometimes we, in our culture, there is a tendency to look to the things you can do. Right? We got a problem over here. We have homeless people in the city of Seattle. You may have noticed if you've been outside this building, like anywhere, right? And so what we need to do is we need to focus all of our attention on what we do with homeless people, right? We need to, maybe, if we gave them just the right app, and we gave them, let's build an app for homeless people, and let's give them all a phone. And you may have noticed a lot of homeless people have phones, actually. And then they can know where to go to get food. Right? So let's do that. Or let's just give them all sleeping bags. Or maybe let's find a go where they can stay. So that's part of what we're talking about here, to maybe build up. But what the prophet also does, let's get at the root. That's exactly right. Our culture don't want to do that, right? Because sometimes the people who are trying to build the app to find the solution are also the people that are causing the problems here, right? So let's don't criticize these guys for maybe not paying as much tax as they could so we wouldn't have this problem over here, right? Let's just everybody join together for a win-win. But prophets aren't about win-win. They're about honesty, right? Win-win is about holding my place of primacy and also doing something for the problem over here. Sometimes the prophet's saying, hey, we got a problem over here at the root here that's causing this problem over here. That's why prophets were highly disfavored by people like Herod. Right? So the people in power don't want a prophet around because the prophet's not just going to say, hey, let's all get on the same page and let's together deal over here, because that's actually holding in place the system that gave us the problem in the first place. Right? You guys remember Andrew Carnegie's, do you remember how Andrew Carnegie said, here's the deal, you let me make money however I want to make money, and then I'll decide how to give it away. Right? And that became the thing, right? The thing is, don't look at this, look at my libraries, right? Look at everything over here. And the prophet says that's not okay. We have to look here and here. Right? So prophets, that's why they died. That's why they died, because powerful folks don't like looking at the problem that they caused in the first place. They just want everybody to get on board over here. Right? So anyway, so that's the destroy and overthrow piece that makes prophets so unappealing to people in power. Yeah.
Often people who aren't well versed in the Bible, they think that prophets are there telling the future. Mm-hmm. But
Okay.
Somebody told me once that a better way to tell them is, no, the function of a prophet is to call the people to account. And that's always stuck with me, because that means you have to look at what really is.
Yeah. What Martha said is the function of the prophet is to call people to account based on what is. But when you know what is, what do you also know?
What isn't?
Well, what isn't, but what do you know when you know what is?
So then what is?
What will be, right? Because these things have an arc. They have trajectory, right? So if you take away people's capacity to collective bargain, or you take away people's capacity to have health insurance through their work, and you push it out onto the state, but then you take away the state's capacity to cover that. You know what's going to happen, right? It's like with my son. I say, here's the deal. If you don't do your homework and turn in your assignments, I'm going to take away your phone. I don't want to take away your phone because that's a big pain for me, because then I got to track you down in person as opposed to track you on the phone, right? But there's consequence to things that happen. And the prophets are saying, like you said, if we don't take care of this, which is a real problem, we're just going to have more of this. So it makes them look like they can see into the future, but really they just have a clarity on the reality of the moment, which allows them to see what's going to happen. Right? You all know what that's like. Right? If this is going to happen, right? That's what these guys are doing. So anyway, we got that's the role of the prophet, and that freaks out who in this story?
Herod.
Freaks out Herod. Of course, it freaks out Herod. Right? So we see that Herod is attracted to the power of the kingdom of heaven, don't we? We see that the author is saying family matters and moral relationships in families matter. That is valid, even though we're all part of God's family. How our family acts also matters, right? So this is the author coming back and saying, I'm not throwing out family morality and family matters, and we're talking about power and prophecy here, and how Herod is freaked out because of the prophecies that are going on. We're going to have time. This is crazy, but I think we're going to have time to do any other questions about this before we get on to some miracles.
Just one other comment.
Please.
I remember your sermon about the veils that we all wear, and what I thought with John the Baptist and Herod, for example, that John the Baptist has punched all these holes in Herod's veil.
Right.
And he's still hanging on to that. He's still wants to wear that veil of the power. Can't get to that without giving it up.
Yeah, in John's, you can't get the power. He's grabbing onto all the sort of shards of veil, like it's all like mangled veil that he's wearing now, right? Yeah, shredded veil. Gordon?
Well, I was hoping this would clear up how you discern a false prophet from a real prophet. The story here is that God spoke directly to him and said, I'm going to put words in your mouth and you're going to have a lot of power over kings and so forth. Well, anybody can go around and say that. So how do you really tell? Is it the accuracy of their description of the current time? Or the power of the way they describe it? How do you
tell a real prophet as opposed to a false prophet? That's a great question. And I think, I would say there's two ways that you tell a real prophet versus a false prophet. The first way is time, right? So over time, you see that what this person said actually comes to fruition, right? But the only way that's going to come to fruition, all right, is that they accurately called out what was happening now. So mostly what happens with false prophets is they're sycophants. So a false prophet is the one that goes to power and says, you're right and you're good and what you're doing is so great and we love you and all of this great stuff that you're doing is going to make the world awesome. Right? That's your false prophet. The real prophet is points to power and says, part of what you're doing is a horror that's causing this. Right? Now, so you sort of, when people in power don't like what you're saying, it probably speaks to some truth about what is being said. Right? So sometimes you see people in power traipse in front of the world, people that support them. I'm going to bring in a bunch of pastors into my office, and they're going to tell you how great what I'm doing is. Right? So then you start to wonder, are those like real prophets they're bringing into the room, or are they just prophets that are going to uphold the opinion of the powerful? So there's two things. Is what this person said going to come true? And secondly, is the person speaking just really trying to kowtow to those in power? Or are they calling to account the bad things that powerful people are doing?
So I'm trying to figure out, can we put to test Muhammad and the Mormon prophets and so forth? They've had tremendous influence. It's hard to tell. Are they really prophets?
Was Muhammad a prophet, or the prophets of Mormonism? Now, I don't know enough about the prophecies of Muhammad or the prophecies of particularly the Mormons.
Moroni or
Joseph Smith.
Who was the prophet? Joseph Smith.
So one of the things that's interesting that I would say about Muhammad, and I don't know about Joseph Smith, that Muhammad he had some prophecies, but he also put in place some patterns of life that are life-giving. So what we see with Muhammad that's different than I think what we see with Jeremiah is he also, and again I don't know a lot about this, but he put in place patterns of engaging the divine that are good and credible for individual and communal spiritual direction, right? Daily prayer and worship and fasting and the calendar base that is communally organized to move a people forward on their spiritual journey. So I'm not sure. So I do know in a very superficial way that there were some good things that were put in place. Does Islam do some bad things? Yeah, I think so. Right? And do some people in Islam do bad things? Yeah, I think so. But it doesn't make them unique, man. They got no corner on that. Which is where false prophets then come in, right? To pervert the system. We see false prophets of Christianity all over the place, right? Coming out and supporting a pope's desire to go on, holy wars, right? There's false prophets galore. Steve?
I think to answer Gordon's question might be we could discern a false from a real prophet if we had a good strong understanding of the prophets here and how they practice their prophet role. And I think you can start. I maybe not, because there's some good prophets that call for holy wars in here too. So I don't know, but I just think that if it might be easier to discern a true prophet from a false prophet if we had a good strong understanding of the role of prophet and prophet making in the Bible. And this is why I think you can't really lump Muhammad in the same category as all the false prophets that occurred just before Jesus and right after Jesus.
Yeah, you look at Elijah, for example, right? And Elijah goes up on the mountain. Do you guys remember this story? And they're going to have a little contest. You're going to have me, Elijah, and my God, and I'm taking on you, Baal guys, right? These are the B-A-A-L prophets, and there's 450 of them, right? And so you guys are going to kill a bull, and I'm going to kill a bull by myself right over here, slaughtering a bull. You're going to do yours. We're going to put them on pyres, right? And then we're going to ask our gods to start them on fire. Remember this story, Terry? Right. So Elijah goes up there and he digs this pit, right? He puts all this wood on. He slaughters a bull and he puts the bull up on top of it, right? And then the Baal guys, they do the same thing and they slaughter their bull, but there's 450 of them, and they dig a trench and they bring their wood over and they put their bull on top, and then they say, okay, you guys, Baal guys. You 450 prophets, you pray to your God to start this thing on fire and burn up your offering if your gods, are pleased with this offering. Remember that story? And so then they're praying and they're going crazy and nothing's happening. So what do they do to sort of up the ante? Start cutting themselves and stuff, bleeding. They're bleeding and they're thrashing around and they're doing all this stuff. And Elijah was sort of, I think, a little bit of a jerk. Right, he was not super wildly popular, probably even with his family, sort of jerky guy. And he's mocking them over there. You guys are a bunch of losers. Your God's a zero. So he's taunting them a little bit. It's like backyard basketball, right? He's sort of mocking them, throwing up a brick or whatever, right? Nothing happens. So then he prays God, and like lightning strikes dead on right in the middle of his thing, whoosh, goes up in flames.
Didn't he also put some water around?
Yeah, he's even mocking him a little more. Oh, you can't do that. And he's throwing water on his. I'm throwing water on mine, because my God, so it's more than that. It's I'm going to put these weights on my ankles, and I'm still going to play against you. So he's throwing the water on it. Lightning comes, poof, right? So then after that, do you know what he does? He has all those guys killed. That's not super great, right? Right? So he just goes a little too far. A little. So when you look at our prophets, Elijah, rock star, right? God coming down, starting the thing on fire, soaking in water, and then he goes a little too far. So our prophets are not perfect in any way here, right? With the whole killing the ball guys. So, but I think they speak truth to power, right? And they say part of the reality is you're part of the problem, Mr. Powerful guys. And when we have sycophants, those are false prophets. They're holding up the status quo. They're holding up the kingdom of the world as opposed to articulating the reality and necessity of the kingdom of God. So now, you take off his head, John the Baptist, birthday party ends, everybody goes home after the birthday party, and Herod Antipas, he comes out on his balcony because he's got a big palace, right? And he's on the balcony, and he's mixed feelings, maybe a little hungover. His wife's not nearly as mad at him as she had been, and he looks out across the Sea of Galilee, and it's a sort of a sunny day, and about a quarter way around from Tiberias, where his palace is, he can see Tabgha, right? Tabgha's about a mile down the road. Which way? Southwest from Capernaum. And he looks across and he sees a massive amount of people. Anything he had ever seen with that guy John the Baptist. And he goes to his spies, he says, what is going on? And his spies come and they say, there's 5,000 people over there, plus their family and friends, having a banquet. He's like, are you kidding me? Who's doing this? Jesus is doing this. And he's like, how's that happening? He's like, well, this is a little awkward, but all those people, you're worried about big crowds and armies and stuff. Let me just tell you, it's a lot worse than you thought, because all of those people he's feeding with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. What does that mean to Herod? Power. What kind of power?
Well, God power. It's God power, but also being able to give material things to people would have Herod beside himself.
Yeah. I mean, but worse than that, what happens when you can feed 5,000 men with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish?
More power than he has.
Big army.
Big army. What makes that army unusual? Any military guys here? What about that army is different than any other army that's ever been on the face of the earth ever?
They don't have
military weapons.
Well, they get weapons in a heartbeat. What?
Their families are with them.
Well, maybe their families are with them. What?
Don't need supplies.
They don't need supplies. My God, if you have an army of 5,000 men, they can stop by, Woolworths and get some guns or whatever. But they don't have supply lines. They can have 4 young guys carrying around a backpack of bread, and that's it, right? They can go anywhere. That's superpower, right? That's superpower. What's that mean, right? When you go over to invade somebody, you don't have to steal all the food of the people you just invaded. What's that mean? It means they like you, right? I mean, think about it from a military strategic point of view. If this dude can raise 5,000 men and feed them out of a backpack, it's done. Who else is done? Rome is done. Everybody is done. Right? There's nobody that can stop Jesus. Nobody. And who knows this better than anybody else? Yeah, it's somebody better than Herod.
Jesus.
Well, Jesus isn't thinking that way. Who's thinking that way? Peter and Andrew and James and John and Judas and the scribes. Those folks, they're like, ooh, ding, 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 ding. Messiah. This is the Messiah. So we have these stories back to back. We have John the Baptist losing his head, Mr. Big Group guy, right? And now Herod sees he's got another problem, but it is way worse than anything John ever brought to the table. I mean, John was like honey and bugs, right? Not super compelling for an army. How many bugs can you get to feed your army, right? So now he's got a way bigger problem. He's got Jesus and the capacity to feed 5,000 plus families, right, with 2 loaves and 5 fish. That's why it comes sort of on the tail. And they love him. Why do they love him so much? Why do the people who he's feeding love him so much? Well, he's feeding them, right? I mean, so like free lunch. Everybody loves a free lunch. But also, it's because he loves them, right? So it says, Jesus, what's it say here? The apostles gathered. Jesus says, come to a deserted place, but they can't get to a deserted place. And it says down here, Jesus has compassion on them. Right? So not only can he feed them, but he likes them. And he loves them. And they keep following him. And he's even trying to get away from them, isn't he? Mm-hmm. And they follow him. And so what's he do? Does he run faster when they follow him? Does he find a better deserted place? He's probably he's tired, isn't he? He's probably pretty tired. But he still goes to him. Right? So that kind of leadership, plus the food thing, nobody's seen it.
Like a model for the church.
It's a model for the church. Yeah, if we could, yeah, it's true. We feed a lot of people with just a little bit of bread.
A little bit of wine. And a lot of compassion.
A little bit of wine and a lot of compassion. That's probably what we're better at than bread and wine.
In this Bible, they have headings, which are useful, but that's the feeding the 5,000, and over here, he's feeding the 4,000. And his disciples say, how can we do this? And they've already done it.
That's weird. Well, there's
See, I don't know it all.
So we'll get back into this. We'll get into this. We'll do a little more. What?
One big feeding of with the 2 fish and the bread, but apparently there were 2.
There were 2, right?
I didn't know that.
And one with 5,000, one with 4,000, one that has 12 baskets of leftovers, and one that has 7 baskets of leftovers. So we're going to get to that because they're surprised again. You think, how can you be surprised twice?
Slow learner.
No, there's a reason. So one of the reasons is the folks he's feeding here are Jewish.
And the others are not?
They're not. They're Gentiles. We'll get to that, right? They're on the other side, right down in the Decapolis region, right near where he healed a legion, right? In the region of the Gennesenes. So that's it's a different story. But again, it's talking about the bigness that the inclusiveness that Mark's representing to us. So I guess we almost got into the feeding of the 5,000. So close. We'll touch on it again next week, and then we'll just keep going with the Bible. Let's have a prayer. God, it is amazing what you are capable of, the manner by which you work in the world, the way in which you illumine our eyes towards your kingdom. And the kingdom of heaven that we're in right here, right now, together as we study the text. And for that, we give you thanks. Bless us as we continue this journey into Jesus' life and the patterns by which you reveal who you are through the way he is in the world, that we may go forth as people who bless those that we meet along the way. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
One of the things, though, that in Jeremiah, when he says to take apart and demolish, he says, and then start over building and planting.
Right, we didn't get to that, but that's true, right? That's the other piece of the prophet,
Right.
is to plant those seeds. No, you tear down and you build up.
Yeah.
Bye, Joy. Thank you.
Good?